So I have a question for all of you. What is the first thing that you do when you are tempted? Do you run away? Do you run to God? Do you just listen to it? What do you do? And this is not to call anybody out, but many people, they just run to the temptation and they listen to it, right? Now, many people have this misconception that when you are tempted, you have already sinned. No. When you are tempted, you still have the ability to walk away. Now, temptation itself is not bad, right? Because ultimately, temptation is only the influence. It's only the influence. It's only the swaying of you going to something in which you think will make you feel better. In reality, it will not. Now, let me tell you something, right? Just because you were tempted does not necessarily mean that you have already sinned. Now, what exactly is so bad about temptation? The reason why temptation is really bad is because temptation is the thing that leads us to sin, and sin separates us from God, right? Now, we want to run away from temptation, but how do we do that? And first off, how do we even define temptation to begin with? Now, if you look back, right, if you look back and you look at the Greek and Hebrew translations, to be tempted, and the definition from back then, it simply means to be tested. It means to go in and see whether your faith is truly where it's at, you know? And it is this discipline in which we must have, right? It is to face adversity when we are provoked and say no and run away. Now that we've defined what temptation is, how do we overcome it? How do we fight back against it? Now, if we look into what really goes into temptation, what the enemy tries to do to provoke us, we can look at our daily lives. What is the number one temptation that you face every day? Whether it be lust, whether it be gluttony, whether it be gossiping about people, or whether it be cursing or lying or stealing, whatever it may be, what is the number one temptation that you face every day? And think about it, right? Think about it. That is more than likely your weakest link when it comes to your spiritual walk with God. And if you really think about it, it makes sense, because the devil, he will not attack you in areas where you're strong, because he knows that he can't influence you. He knows that he can't attack you there. But if he knows that you have lustful eyes, he will provoke you. He will get somebody, or he will try to draw your attention to some other place in order for you to fall into that, because he knows that that's your weakest link, and that's where he can try to trap you. Now, I'm not saying that temptation is just necessarily lust. It can literally be anything. Temptation is always around the corner. It's always walking around, and the devil is always looking for somebody to devour. You must make sure that that somebody is not you. You must make sure that that somebody, when faced with temptation, is the first person to run to God, right? And the reason why I say this is because we are literally commanded to run away from temptation, because temptation is the thing that leads us to sin, right? Now, in the second book of Timothy, chapter 2, verse 22, we are literally told to run away from the evil desires of the youth, the youthful lusts in which we are tempted with, right? And that we should pursue faith, righteousness, love, and peace, and to call on the Lord with a pure heart. We are told to literally do that. And it's because temptation is something that is always going to lead us to sin. There is no temptation that we can entertain that is not already leading us to sin, or already has us in sin, right? So what do we do? We must cut temptation off at the start, at the door. Don't let it enter in your home. Tell it that nobody's home. And really mean it. Run away, because you can't necessarily fight back against certain temptations, but you can pray about them. And you can run to God, and you can learn to do all these things for him. You can learn to do all these things so that when you are faced with temptation, there is nothing that's going to stop you. There is nothing that's going to be like, oh, well, you have to do this and do that. No. You don't ever have to worry about a thing when you're facing temptation, or when you're trying to fight back against temptation, so long as you go to God. Now, I have a verse right here that I actually wrote down, and it comes from the first book, the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 10 verse 13, right? And it says that no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure. As it literally says, he will not let us be tempted beyond what we can bear, because ultimately what temptation is, it's a test of our faith. It is a test of our love for God. And if we run away, we're showing him that we do love him. So anytime that you are tempted, instead of thinking about it as, no, I can't do this, think about it as, I will run away because I love God more than I love my sin. Love God above everything else, and be careful with what influences you. Okay, because temptation is around every corner. It is around in our every single daily lives, whether it be the friends that we hang out with that love to talk bad about other people, or whether it be the music that we listen to, or just these things, right, where like the music, right, you might not realize it right away, but the music is making you say very vile things, or well, it's influencing you to do these things even though you might not mean it. Like, for example, if you look at something like drill music, well, what is it? What is it about? It frankly tends to be very violent, and ultimately it'll have you cursing and wishing bad upon people, and it's all these things that will influence you into tempting you into doing bad, and into going to do that sin that you said that you wouldn't do. And anytime that you were tempted, run to God. Like, seriously, just run to him, because he cares about how you feel. He cares about what you're thinking. He knows you. He knows you better than you know yourself. And if you give it up to God, right? And when I say give it up to God, I mean give it up to God. He will help you out. But know that he cannot help you out if you are not willing to give it up. He cannot help you out if you are not willing to give it up. Whether it be music, or whether it be that temptation with your friends or something about that, you have to be willing to give it up. You have to be willing to, put your foot down and say, I can't have this anymore. I don't want this anymore. So Lord, please take it away. And he will do it. But you have to remain faithful, because no matter what we do, the devil's always going to be trying to tempt us. The devil's always going to try to tempt us in some sort of way. He's always going to be lurking around, looking for you to become weak. And when you are most weak is when you are not with God. And that is exactly why when Eve was tempted with the apple or the fruit by Satan, right? She fell. Why? Because she wasn't residing with the God. And although it is a literal sense where she wasn't with God, regardless, this is an example in which we must use and say, no, we need to do better. And if she had remembered that God was there and that God wanted to help her out and that God loved her, if she had realized that, then she wouldn't have taken the fruit, because she would have realized that God is all you need. So please remember this. Whenever you are faced with temptation, whenever you are faced with adversity, don't think about it as, oh, I need to hate this. And yes, of course you should. But you should think about it as a testament to God's love. And that's it.